Welcome to Working Towards Our Purpose, a podcast that offers a different perspective on what a job can be. For everyone out there that's heard that voice in the back of their head asking for something more, it's time to listen to it. I'm your host, Gino, and join me as I interview people who have decided to work in their own purpose. Together, we will learn, become inspired, and hopefully find our own path towards working in our purpose. Welcome back to Working Towards Our Purpose, and today I have another solo episode and something I'm still getting used to and kind of forcing myself to do it, but I had a little idea that I kind of wanted to talk about in this episode, and we'll get right into it. So over the past few weeks, I've had two people kind of like reach out to me about what I'm doing, and one of them found me through my podcast, was kind of an old friend that I got reconnected with, and then one of them was just kind of like a DM on Instagram from somebody I met, once or twice before, and he kind of got me thinking about this idea that like you kind of get to choose or decide like what you'll be known for or what you are known for, and I think that that's kind of a cool and empowering thing to like think about. I think at least for me, for a long time, like I was just an engineer because that was my job, and I didn't really feel proud of that, or I didn't feel like that really meant much to me, mostly because it wasn't something that I chose and it was just kind of something that I did. But going to the idea of like getting to decide what you will be known for, as I mentioned before, and in my last solo episode, when I first quit my corporate job, I tried to put that behind me, and I tried to not really talk about it or think about it. And, when I first started networking and meeting people, I didn't really use that as like a definition of who I was or like an opener. It was more so like, I'm doing this new thing now. This is my business. I do podcasting. And I never really talked about my past engineering life until I met one person specifically who found out like much after I met her that I had a past life of doing engineering, and went to college for it and everything. And she was like kind of surprised and was like, "Oh, you never said that." And I was honest with her, and I was like, "Yeah, it's kind of something that like I don't really like to talk about because I wasn't proud, I guess, of that thing that I did." And she was like, "Regardless of how you feel about it, when I hear that you have a college education, I put you in a different category." And when you think of somebody who went to college, you think of somebody who was able to complete set amount of tasks in order to get the piece of paper. And although I kind of didn't really like to hear that because I didn't want to be judged for the fact that I went to college, even in a good way, I kind of heard what she was saying, and I was like, okay, yeah, she's right in the fact that like I will probably get judged in a different way because people know that I did that. But for me, it was more about like explaining my story of how I got to where I am. And I think that in doing that and in being transparent and vulnerable and authentic with my story, I think that really what that does for me is it helps me connect with people who are in similar places. And I think that that's really kind of who I'm trying to reach with this podcast, is people who do feel like they're stuck, or people who are in jobs that they don't care about and think that maybe there's not another option, or maybe they have to be doing the thing that they're doing. And I don't know. I think you always have a choice. And I know that I'm in a fortunate position to be able to say that. But at the end of the day, I think you get to decide where you put your energy into, and wherever you put your energy into expands. So that being said, getting back to the idea of you get to decide what you're known for, is like, I get to decide what people know me for based off of what I do and how I talk about what I do. So in this podcast, I talk a lot about me leaving corporate and me feeling like I was stuck, me choosing to pick something different and to try to figure something else out. And that has connected with people, and it's resonating with people, and it makes people know me for the person that left corporate. And I think that that's a good thing, because then it helps me connect with the people that I'm actually trying to connect to. Going back to the specific people that reached out to me, one of them was a friend from a really long time ago. We were both engineers. We interned at the same company together before I even got into like the real world. We were still in college, and I really haven't talked to this person in a very long time. And somehow he found out about my podcast and he listened to a few episodes and specifically the first one. And he was like, man, I completely feel the same way that you did when you were here. And, he feels stuck and he wants something more. And for me, it was really cool to get a message from him and be like, hey man, I resonated with this, thanks for putting it out there. And that for me was kind of like, I don't know, it showed me that like, I guess what I'm doing is maybe helping some people in some way. And I feel so uncomfortable even saying that, which I think comes from like me not wanting to ever talk about myself. But I think that's, if I'm looking at the facts, kind of like what happened. I don't know. It felt nice to have somebody be like, hey, I can empathize with, what you did and maybe I want to be doing something similar or, something like that. And then what really gave me this idea was when the second person reached out to me, and it was somebody that I met like a handful of times before. It was kind of a friend of a friend. And, when I first met him, I don't really remember what I told this person, but I must have been saying something like, how I started my business and I left corporate. And I must have been honest with my story and, leaving corporate and starting my own business and all that stuff. Because when he reached out to me, he was like, hey man, I'm leaving my job next week. We should grab a beer and get together. And for me, that was kind of like, it's what gave me the idea for this episode, because it was like, oh, this guy who I don't really know that well knows me as the guy that left his corporate job to try to start a business and figure it out. So it was kind of like almost like a cool thing for me to be like, oh, wow, this is what this guy knows me for. And that was because like I made the decision to talk about that and to be honest with like where I've been and what I'm doing and why I was unhappy. And yeah, I don't know. It just felt good to have him reach out to me in that way. And also kind of just, gives me confidence in like what I am doing and the way that I present myself nowadays. It makes me more confident and more comfortable with how I'm presenting myself to people. And, not that you need reassurance from other people that you're doing the right thing, but it's nice to be able to like connect, I guess. And even if it's not everybody, like I'm just giving an example of two people, but like making it feels to me that like I'm making a difference at least with those two people. And again, this is probably my self-conscious small mind thinking, but like I'm thinking like, oh man, even if I just was able to help two people in one way, like that to me feels purposeful. And that to me is like almost validation of like, hey, you're on the right course, you're on the right path. You're doing something that resonated with at least two people. And that to me is like really fulfilling. And I like this path that I'm going down. So, in that being said, I think these solo episodes are going to be important to push that further, even though they're uncomfortable for me. And I don't really like preaching to people. Hopefully I'm not coming off as speaking to people. And I'm more so just trying to share my own experiences in the hopes that they will resonate or positively affect others. And I think with the more practice that I do with these solo episodes, the better I'll get at that. So yeah, just trying to push through the uncomfortableness of it and get it out there. So a few other things that I just want to mention too on this topic, because I noticed another sort of correlation in regards to this topic. I'm not sure if I've said it much on this podcast yet, but originally I got into podcasting, into audio engineering from music, because music was like kind of my first passion. And I always just like, I remember when I first learned how to play the guitar, I locked myself in my room and just played it until I figured out like how to play songs. And like, I would just, try to learn from tablature songs that I liked. And it was something that was like very consuming in a good way. And I've always just like told myself, like, if it's anything music, I could figure out how to do it. And I've always kind of had that confidence in it. Music was, my original passion and the reason why I got into podcasting. And I remember telling myself, like, when I first started my podcast company, that once that made enough money, then I would get into music production and I would work with bands and kind of, mixing and recording engineering and all that kind of stuff. So as I was like kind of looking towards 2024 at the end of 2023, I was telling myself like, why are you waiting to do that? You should just kind of do that now. And at the same time, there was a music project that came to me, and it was a friend who I used to be in a band with, and he wants me to mix his album. So he sent me a song, and I mixed the first song, and I sent it back to him. And, like a week after I did that, I got a message from a friend of his who I met once. And I guess he heard the song that I mixed, and he was like, "Hey man, I'm working on this project. Do you think, you can master this for me when I'm done recording and mixing it?" And that for me again was like a huge thing. It was like, whoa, I did one thing in music, and now this other person has seen what I've done, and now they know me as like this guy that does this music. So it's like, again, just one of those like crazy things. Like I'm not an expert in music production, but I guess I have to give myself credit for being involved with it for the past 10 years at least. And yeah, it was kind of a validation of like, oh, this guy sees me as the guy that does music. So I guess really, as I'm thinking about it now, it's interesting the different perceptions that like you have of yourself versus the perceptions that people have of you. Because I guess if I were to look at myself, I wouldn't say like I'm a music producer or a mixing engineer or a recording engineer. I wouldn't say any of that because I don't think that I'm good enough yet to be able to say that. But there's other people out there that look at me as being able to do it better than them maybe. And whether that's true or not, it's a different perception. So it's interesting to flat out see that. Like when somebody messages me and they're like, "Hey, can you do this for me?" It's like, whoa, this guy sees me differently than I see myself. That's kind of cool. And it kind of gives you more confidence in yourself and your own abilities. So yeah, hopefully this wasn't all over the place, but the point being like, now that I'm, again, deciding what to be known for, now that I'm choosing to do more work in music and I just started, and I'm not like saying that I'm this expert or anything, but I'm just doing what I can and helping people out where I can, then now, because I'm doing it more and I'm investing more energy into it, more people are going to see that I'm doing this thing. And eventually they're going to start coming towards me and being like, "Oh, you're the guy that does this. You did this other project. Can you do this for me?" And I think that's just really cool. And again, so like freeing and motivating that like you can choose to do that thing. Like, you can go learn how to play the ukulele. And a week ago, you didn't even know what the instrument was, but in 2 weeks, you're telling people you're playing the ukulele, you're learning how to use it. And now all of a sudden you're the person that plays ukulele. It's like, I don't know, the free will of it, or the endless opportunities. Like you can choose anything and you can really do anything that you want. And it doesn't mean like you have to quit your job, and it doesn't mean you have to, not be a parent or any of that stuff, but like you can just choose to also do this new thing. And I think that that's just really a really cool thing to be able to do. And yeah, hopefully this episode made sense. Still getting used to this new solo kind of format. And yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to share that thought with you all, and hopefully it resonated with somebody. And if it didn't, next week I will have another interview podcast for you, and we'll get back to learning from other people. And thank you all for listening. I appreciate everybody who listens and tunes into this show, and I will see you all real soon. Be well. Thank you for listening to Working Towards Our Purpose. If you liked today's episode and are interested in more, you can sign up for my Substack newsletter with the link in the show notes, where I share thoughts, tips, and ideas that I'm learning along my journey to help inspire you. The show was produced by Pleasant Podcast at pleasantpodcast.com.